Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
Hello and thanks for joining Corporate Governance Platform. The program is proudly brought to you by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals. My name is Tunde Odeyemi, and on the show this evening, we are going to be looking at effective remuneration policy. Effective remuneration policy. And to lead in the conversation is a governance expert and a distinguished fellow of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, FOLAKE Odion, FCIS. Fola Odion is a multi-talented business attorney with legal experience spanning 14 years, with a foremost tax law firm and a leading oil and gas multinational. She is a fellow of ICSAN and a seasoned corporate governance professional with experience in domestic and international corporate governance and administration, compliance and reporting. She is adept at managing teams of professionals and collaborating with stakeholders across functions and countries to drive business results. She is also skilled in providing legal expertise to the board of directors of multinational companies, interpreting regulations, identifying opportunities and optimization, and mitigating risk. Fola, it's nice to have you on Corporate Governance Platform.
Thank you so much, Mr. Odeyemi.
And we want to appreciate your time. And you came so early because of this program. Thank you very much. We want to discuss something that is very pivotal to corporate governance. And as a matter of fact, something that every employee should be interested in, remuneration policy. I think every employee at one time or the other will be looking forward to being remunerated well. And I think at this point, I'd like to call on our viewers to be part of the show. To be part of the show, you can ask questions or make comments, and you can only do this by sending text message. Please send your text message to 080-2323-1287. I'll take the number again, 080-2323-1287. Only text message to either ask question or make comment and be part of the conversation on effective remuneration policy. Like I said, we should be interested, every employee should be interested in remuneration. But I'd like to start this conversation by asking, what are the implications if an organization does not get remuneration right? You know, remuneration, as we know, is very cardinal and very pivotal to corporate governance. If an organization doesn't get it right, what are the implications?
I mean, the key implication if an organization doesn't get it right in remuneration is that it's going to be hard to retain good talents. And then the morale of employees and even the executive management will be low. And what would then happen is that the employees could exit the company very easily. It becomes like a revolving door. People come in and go out anyhow, and then the reputation to the outside world will not be good because people talk. And then, you know, these employees, even when they leave the company, might go out and say, oh, because of XYZ, the remuneration is poor, that's why they're leaving. And that is why a company needs to get its remuneration policy right. Thank you.
Okay, a company needs to get its remuneration policy right. We have a remuneration committee of the board. Mm-hmm. What are the basic functions of this remuneration committee, especially as provided for in the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance?
Okay, so the basic function is really about setting the remuneration policy of the company. And in doing that, it has to be clear and transparent, clear and transparent means that everyone should be able to see by reading the documents the basis on which they arrived at whatever remuneration package for the directors, the executive directors, the senior management, and even employees. Because that way, once it is clear and transparent, then this issue of not able to retain the best talent will not be there. The issue of low morale would not be there, because when people don't know what the remuneration package is, it makes them very suspicious, and then they don't get to trust the company.
Okay, when you say clear and transparent, it means there should be full disclosure for everybody.
Yes.
What does it then mean? Everybody in the organization will know the remuneration of every other person in the organization.
Okay, thank you. Not necessarily. So what it means is that the remuneration package, the guidelines with which they arrive at the remuneration of everyone in the organization should be clearly spelled out. Of course, because remuneration is still seen as a somewhat confidential information, it's not going to be open to everyone, but the key people, for instance, the board of directors, the company secretary, that need to reference those documents to see on what basis they arrived at the remuneration of XYZ should be able to reference that document and understand the basis upon which the remuneration was reached.
Okay, it's understanding the basis upon which the remuneration, okay. Now, it's a catchphrase in corporate governance that remuneration should be sufficient to attract, to retain, and to motivate. Then they now went further to say that it should not be excessive. Can you shed more light on this statement, and why do you think this particular principle of remuneration is desirable?
Thank you. So, when remuneration is, it's about balance, really. So it's saying that the remuneration should be fair, but it should not be excessive. What it means is that it should be enough to motivate and incentivize the people who are privy to it, the employees, the executive directors and all. But it should not be too much, because you know how they say it, he who pays the piper dictates the tune, right? So if someone is all about the high remuneration package, what it then means is that when he's supposed to give some hard truths to the company, he might shut his mouth because he feels that, well, the company might not like what I'm saying and might chase me out. So it's to prevent conflict of interest, while making sure that employees, staff, and executive are well remunerated, but it is not so excessive that they then forget the main reason why they are corporate governance professionals in the company.
That's fantastic. I know employees at times can be under remunerated, and they complain to be, probably because they're under remunerated, there are different types of different complaints. Can employees of organizations be over remunerated?
Well, I mean, it is possible, and it also flows from the question you answered before now about remuneration being fair but not excessive. So they can be over remunerated, really, because while everyone, likes, money and all that, by the end of the day, you don't want to set the remuneration without clear-cut guides, so that you're not just bringing in people who sort of do not optimize the value that the company offers. You don't want people who are just, coming in just to get whatever they want from the company without adding any value just because of the money. So employees can be over remunerated, and that is why the Code of Corporate Governance tries to balance it by saying remuneration should be fair but not excessive.
Okay, the Remuneration Committee of the board is, entrusted under the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance to develop a formal remuneration policy, structure, procedures for the board of directors and, of course, the senior management cadre of the organization. Now, the question is, who is given the task of designing, developing the remuneration policy, structures, and procedures for employees of organizations that are below senior management cadre?
Okay, so really the remuneration committee actually sets the policy for the entire organization. So they could then set a policy that would then even cover, the lower cadres of employees in the organization. But when it comes to implementation, it will then be the top management, people like, the CFO, the chief executive officer, that would then implement that. And one thing to also bear in mind is that irrespective of, what the remuneration committee sets as the policy, the board of directors ultimately approves whatever remuneration package of anyone of the company.
Okay, let's look a little bit into the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance again, and we are going to be looking at Principle 16. Now, Principle 16 of the Code on Remuneration Governance states that the remuneration of non-executive directors should be fixed by the Board of Directors and approved by the shareholders at the annual general meeting. Is it proper for Board of Directors that the company has not been making profit, probably in the last 2 to 3 years, to recommend increase in the remuneration package of Board of Directors?
Okay, so I won't be too quick to say it is improper, right? But, what I would say is that, sometimes this thing depends on the circumstances of each case. But generally, if a company is not making profit, then it will be improper to then say you're increasing the remuneration. Note that we're not saying that you're stopping the remuneration of those directors. This is about increase. And then, because even when you're setting the remuneration policy as a remuneration committee, you should be looking at the financial reality of the company. So if the company does not really have the funds, it's been making losses over the past 2 years, then it's difficult to say justification for recommending an increase in remuneration package for the directors.
You indirectly said it's not proper. Now, still another leg to that. Some shareholders are of the opinion that if a company is not making money, if the company is not making profit, is declaring loss, let's assume 2 to 3 years as well, that the board of directors of such company should be denied of the allowances and benefits. What is your view on this?
So that is not proper, because now the remuneration of the non-executive directors, for instance, or even the executive directors, is not just based on the profits to the company. It's based on, have they given their fair and strategic advice to the company. If they've done that properly, then the fact that the company is not making profit does not mean they should be denied compensation. And another thing is that a company might also choose not to declare dividends strategically, not because it's not making profits. So, because there's what they call plow-in of profit. A company might decide maybe it wants to expand its capital base for several reasons, and then it's not going to pay dividends. That does not mean it's not making profit. So there are different things that play into this, but generally, once the directors are doing their duties properly, there's no reason to deny them of their remuneration.
Allowances and benefits.
Allowances and
okay,
benefits.
When you say that the company can plow back or plow in the profit, how do they expect, explain this to the shareholders? How will the shareholders take it? Because shareholders will always expect, dividends. So what is the best way to go about this? So
the best way would be, for the board, when they make their reports. So for instance, before they even file the annual report to, CAC and the other external bodies, they present it to the shareholders and all that, to explain in their internal documents the strategic plan of the company, putting it in such a way that, okay, even if we're not declaring dividends, but this money is going to benefit the company in the long run by XYZ reason. So once they're clear and transparent, then it's going to be easier for the shareholders to buy into their vision. It's when the directors are, being closed-mouthed and not being clear, they're not being transparent, and then they're not declaring dividend. Of course, the shareholder is not going to be happy because he's in that business to make profits.
Okay, the directors should try as much as possible to communicate with the shareholders. If you are just joining us, it's Corporate Governance Platform, and we are broadcasting live from MITV. This evening, our conversation is on guides to effective remuneration policy, and you can be part of the show by asking questions or making comments. Let your comment or question go to 080-2323-1287. I take that again, 080-2323-1287. We want you to be part of the conversation on Guides to Effective Remuneration Policy. Fola, you have said a lot, and one of those things that you mentioned, which is very critical here, is whatever policy, whatever you are doing, explain, be clear and be transparent to the stakeholders. If it is the employees, be transparent. If it is the shareholders, be clear and be transparent to them. But there's an issue I want to look at, the relevance of clawback policy. You know, clawback policy enables the company to recover undeserved benefits. Undeserved benefits from directors who received on-hand, income, probably by tendering false information. How do this work, and how can the clawback policy be made effective? Okay,
so the essence of the clawback policy really is to uphold the tenets of ethics in the company, really, because you don't want a situation where someone is reaping where they did not sow. Because if you did that, it's going to impact the reputation of the company further down the line, and then it's going to encourage people to carry out unethical or what they call sharp practices, believing that they can do it with impunity and nothing would happen. So the clawback policy is about putting clear-cut guidelines in the policy document that if it is discovered that a director has gotten some benefit undeservedly, then those things will be collected from him. It's also to prevent conflict of interest of directors and other members of the company.
Okay, so many people are trying to call. Please don't call, just send a text message. Now I have a text message here that says, if the remuneration policy in my company is faulty, and we have people that are supposed to be earning higher that are earning less as compared to others, what should an employee do? It's a question from Mr. Okoli.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Okoli. So now many organizations, they have, what they call appraisal periods.
Okay.
Every, some have it like maybe quarterly or twice yearly, but there's usually a main one in the year where the supervisor or the manager speaks with the employee and finds out what is the person uncomfortable about in the company. So I believe that such an appraisal situation is a good opportunity to raise this issue with your supervisor, because remember that your line manager, fine, he serves the interest of the company, but he also serves your own interest. Okay. And then you can speak with that person in a, in a no-hold-barred, respectful way, and believing that that person will take it up with the higher authorities and find a resolution to the issue.
Okay, still trying to help Mr. Okoli here. What if there's no opportunity for that appraisal where Mr. Okoli will be able to voice out and say, this is my mind concerning remuneration? What do you expect him to do? Okay, if there's no opportunity for an appraisal, I would hope and expect that at least, Mr. Okoli would have a supervisor, okay, a direct manager in the office, and so you don't necessarily need to wait for the appraisal period. You can walk into the office and discuss with the person, and then of course I guess the next thing would then be, what if nothing is done? Well, then it then probably shows that it is a toxic environment. Then one would then need to weigh his options as to if one wants to continue to stay in a toxic environment. Okay, that goes back to the very first question that I asked. What are the implications if organization doesn't get it right? Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about disclosure. You talked about clear and transparent. Now, should the allowances and benefits of board of directors be disclosed in the annual report? And if yes, should the payment heads also be captured in the annual report, that these are the allowances, these are the benefits that are accruable or collected by the board of directors in the annual report, so that the shareholders can have a view of it?
Yeah, yes, definitely. I would say, it's also part of the clear and transparent remuneration policy. The allowances and, other expenses, of the board of directors should be disclosed in the annual report. However, you might not necessarily now need to put, Mr. X, this is how much he's collecting, because of confidentiality purposes. But you could just aggregate the amount together and say, the entire board, this is how much the non-executive directors are collecting, this is how much the executive directors are collecting. Bearing in mind that those documents also would be filed ultimately with CAC and public bodies. And then you also want to preserve the confidentiality of certain information while disclosing them in a clear and transparent manner.
Okay, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance provides that the payment for loss of office to the MD, the executive directors or senior management of organization should be based on contractual terms and must be fair and not excessive. What should be the criteria for the payment of loss of office to the non-executive directors, since these are not particularly stated in the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance?
Okay, so if the Remuneration Committee has, in their policy document, has stated this, that will be somewhere that you can point to, even though it's not specifically stated in the Code of Corporate Governance. Another thing would also be the appointment letters of the directors. So definitely one needs to look at it to see what it says, when it has to do with loss of office, termination in any respect, and start from there. And if it provides terms as to how the benefit should be calculated, definitely follow that. So that's what I would say.
Okay, I want to create a scenario. The board of directors recommend the remuneration for the directors, but this must be approved by the shareholders at annual general meeting, right? What if what is recommended is not approved? This is a scenario. What will happen?
Well, the directors will need to go back to their drawing board. Really, they need to go back to their drawing board, because really, if the shareholders are vetoing it, I guess it would then be, okay, why did they veto it? And then they should go back and see if they can address those areas and then represent it to the board, to the shareholder, because it's just like querying a document. And then if the shareholders are, what's it called now, are adamant that this thing is not going to go above a particular level, then the board of directors should justify it with data. I mean, they say data is king, right? Justify with data, explaining to them that you're not going to be able to get the best talent if you don't get up to this particular benchmark. And with that, they can also even benchmark what the remuneration policy of similar organizations are, so that the shareholders will know that it's not like they're going way above, the benchmark.
Okay, I would like to take you up on that. Assuming there is a remuneration survey of similar companies in the same industry, and it is discovered that the remuneration package of a particular company is much more higher than the industry standard, what do you think should be done?
So what the remuneration committee can do is that it should then revisit its the metrics for determining the remuneration package to see where the gap is. Because sometimes, even across, industries, some, based on, how will I call it now, based on, will I say, their clout, pay way higher.
Okay.
But then, so it's about looking at the metrics to make sure that there is no leakage anywhere, that the metrics that are used are benchmarked against the industry standard and align with it. And once it aligns with it, and if there's any gap, it readjusts it. So what it would then mean is that it's not like you're coming out to say you're cutting down people's salaries, because people are going to kick against it. But if you say that this is the new policy against which you get this raise and all that, and people know that they need to do X, Y, Z to meet up to that, then it's a sort of like seamless way of making sure that the remuneration package aligns without burning any bridges.
Okay, so there is no room for cutting down, even if it is over the industry standard.
Well, it's, how I put it, it's more of revise your performance metrics and then tell people what they need to do to meet up with that metrics. So if they're not meeting up with it, it's not if you're cutting it down, it's just they're simply not meeting it, so they do not deserve that pay. So it's more of like semantics and the way one reaches the goal.
Okay, let's talk about ICSAN. Can ICSAN carry out remuneration survey for companies that are interested in order to guide their remuneration policy and ensure that they are very competitive?
Definitely, because ICSAN is the corporate governance hub of Nigeria, and then it has research institutes and all that and committees that do this thing. So what it can do, of course, ICSAN can carry out the survey and aggregate the data, because again, what companies want to see is that what are the industry standard, what is the benchmark. They don't necessarily need to know that X company pays X amount. They just need to know that, oh, companies within this industry, this is how much they pay. So in doing that, ICSAN will protect the confidentiality of, members and, people that it corresponds with, while making sure that companies and its other stakeholders are clear as to the remuneration package. So it's like a win-win situation for everyone.
So ICSAN can provide a service?
Yes.
For a fee of free of charge?
Definitely for a fee.
Okay, you have had it. Companies out there that are interested in having a robust remuneration survey, you can contact ICSAN for it. Let me ask you this question. What is your advice to two sets of people, employers of labor, employees, on how to go about remuneration?
So for employers of labor, I would say that, they should not try to cheat employees, because sometimes you see some employers trying to lowball employees. At the end of the day, it comes back to bite, because when the employee finds who will pay them better and find out that they've been shortchanged, they stop trusting you and they're just planning their exit. And for employees too, at the end of the day, you have to give the value of what you're receiving from your employer, so that you can ask for more and be entitled to more. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. People say that motivation is not all about money. Mm-hmm. But I want to ask you, being an expert in this field, do good remuneration motivate employees?
Definitely.
Actually, remuneration too is not all about money. There are some other things to it. Let's not streamline it to money. Mm-hmm. Good payment, does it motivate employees?
Yes, good payment motivates employees. It's not all there is to it, but at least it's a starting point, because you'll find out that if there's good payment and the work condition is toxic, an employee will still leave. However, even if the work condition is really, really good and the remuneration is really, really poor, the employee will still leave. So that balance about being fair and not excessive is the way to go.
Being fair and not excessive. Thank you very much. And I think at this point, we need to wrap up on the conversation. We'd like to thank you very much for coming on the show and for sharing your thoughts on on guides to effective remuneration policy. And for our viewers out there, thank you very much for being part of the show. Mr. Okoli, I hope we answered your question to your satisfaction. We invite you to join us again next week, same station, same time. I remain your host, Dr. Tunde Odeyemi, and on behalf of my producer Adeboye Galabiron and the technical director David Adepoju, I say bye for now.
Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria.